Okay, I'm so excited by this one. I finally get to share with you the interview and the time that I spent with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, the two Scuderia Ferrari drivers. And I know that's the thing that you're all here to see. But before we dive into the interview, where I got to ask them about being a Formula One driver, the role of data within Formula One today, that shift away from cars being mechanical to being more technical than ever before, I do want to speak a little bit about the weekend itself. This was my first ever time at the Canadian GP. I think it's going to have a special place in my heart because the joy that it brought me to hear people speak both English and French interchangeably. For those of you who don't know, my first language is French. I was born in France, grew up in Belgium, British by passport, and I speak English at home. And so I don't know why, but I think I'm going to have an emotional, well, I do know why. I'm going to have an emotional attachment, I think, moving forward to this Grand Prix. I spent the weekend with Amazon AWS, who also happened to be not just one of the main sponsors of the series, but also a sponsor of Scuderia Ferrari, but also the title sponsor of this race, which meant that we got such incredible access and we got to experience things that I think I will probably never experience again, like sitting on the pit wall and at the gantry and learning all about data and being able to scroll through actual live data from the previous year, but actually get to understand the sense of what everyone on the pit wall is looking at, what the race engineers are looking at. But also I got to watch a race sat from the pit wall, not a Formula One race, but to be so close to the action was absolutely mind-blowing. I got to sit down with the two Scuderia Ferrari drivers. We obviously got to do the pit walk, got to see the garages up front, also got to experience paddock hospitality, which is in a league of its own, quite frankly. But it was such a unique experience. So a big thank you to AWS, Scuderia Ferrari, but also the Canadian GP promoters for allowing us to see a little bit what's happening behind the scenes. The Canadian GP is also a very, very popular racetrack. It is named after the late Villeneuve. I think it has a contract until 2031, which not many tracks have a contract that stem that long. And it was a wild race weekend. I don't know if you remember, but we basically experienced all 4 seasons in just one race weekend. And finally, I'll leave you with this. The idea of this video is to give you a little bit of insight into what goes on in the minds of a Formula One driver. It was also such a unique and fortunate opportunity. I still pinch myself on this, that I got to speak to Charles Leclerc just after he won his first Monaco race win, which everyone was ecstatic about. So it was great to get into the mindset of being a Formula One driver and hear both from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz what it takes. But it was also fascinating to hear from both of them how they approach data, because there are over 300 sensors in a Formula One car. Little fun fact, there are also about 300 sensors everywhere on the Formula One car, all giving the teams pieces of information and data that they can use to essentially get to the finish line. That's always the goal, get to the finish line as fast as humanly possible. I also discovered, and I didn't know this prior, that they take off a lot of those sensors in FP3 so they get a sense of the car they want to run for quali and the race, because they actually collected all the data that they needed from the sensors and don't need all of these additional sensors. Which also means that the 100 or 150 sensors that they're taking off the car in FP3 is lowering the weight of the car by 5 kilos. In the moment that that car shifts, the drivers can feel when the car has a higher load or a lower load. And during a normal race weekend, a Formula One car during one weekend will produce a terabyte of data. My big question has always been, is there such a thing as too much data in Formula One?
Hi.
Hello.
I want to kick off by talking a little bit about winning in Formula One. Do you remember what you felt like the first time you won your first Formula One race? Do you remember that feeling?
Of course, you always remember how it feels like when you win an F1 race. It's such a special feeling. So much emotion, also because it doesn't only represent a big thing for you alone, but it's for the whole team. Yeah. And when I say the whole team, we are many, many people back in Maranello, all our partners, and when we achieve the perfect job as a whole team, it has a very, very special feeling. So it's such a joy. Very quickly, you need to already move on to the next one you want to win, but it's a very special feeling.
10 years from now, what do you hope to remember from your win in Monaco? Is there a moment that you've captured? A sound, a song, a noise, a visual Is there something that you hope 10 years from now that you can keep
I
seeing
think
or
I'll,
hear it clearly?
I think I'll always remember just when I cross the finish line.
Yeah.
And obviously there you let all the emotions
Run free.
Yeah, exactly. Which before you try and contain them as much as possible because you've still got the job to finish.
Yeah.
As much as you are thinking about that and hoping that it happens, you've got other things to focus on. But as soon as you cross the finish line, there are so many emotions.
And when you close your eyes, what do you see?
Exactly that moment.
That exact moment?
That exact
I love
moment,
that.
for sure.
F1 is such a unique ecosystem. Like, are there things, you've obviously been in the space for a while, are there things from this unique space that you have still yet to get used to, where you're just like, this is crazy that this is part of my life? Whether it's the fans, the crowds, the travel, is there something?
It's now since 2018 that
Yeah.
I'm in this environment, and it takes quite a long time to get used and for it to become the new normal. I'll say that now I consider my life normal in a way, and
Yeah.
you get used to these kind of things. However, I always remind myself of how lucky I am to
Yeah.
be in that position. It's the dream that I've had since being a child of making racing my work, if
Yeah.
I can call that work, because it's more a passion than a work. And every day
Seems like hard work.
it is hard work, but when you love what you do, it's you don't really see that as work, or
Yeah.
at least I don't, and I enjoy so much what I do, and I'm so lucky to be in that position that every day I remind it to me. Because even when you are a Formula One driver,
Yeah.
and that's all I've dreamed of ever, there are still moments that are tough, and on track, even if I'm a Ferrari driver and that I'm so lucky to be there, when you don't do a good performance.
Yeah.
It's hard mentally to come back, but in those moments I always like to remind myself how lucky I am to be in that position, and yeah, and I am.
As a child, when you were saying this is the thing that you dreamt of, is there misconceptions that you had about that it would be a certain way, and just like, wow, this is so, I didn't expect it to be like this?
As a child, yes. Many misconceptions. I think when I started karting, and when you're a child, you go to the track,
Yeah.
you drive,
Yeah.
stop, you play with your friends. Next session, you go in the car.
Now you're in PR sessions and
Now there are a lot more things around
Yeah.
Formula One that as a child you don't really see, and you don't understand how much of how much tiring is it over the course of a season, and that's why time management is everything. And I put so much attention to it on how do you travel, when do you travel, the different activities that you have to do around a weekend, where do you want to put them, and this is super important because over the course of the season, 24 races, a lot of different jet lags, a lot of flights. You can get very tired, and at the end of the day, the most important thing remains what happens on track and your performance on the track. And to be 100% there, you need to make sure that everything that is around is well organized.
We spend so much time actually talking about the pre-race, the habits that you build and the preparation that you do. How do you look after yourself mentally and physically post-race? Because it's such an adrenaline high, so it feels like from the outside looking in. There's so much you go through that once you've passed that checkered flag and you've done your debriefs, how do you take care of yourself?
Let's say that it depends how it goes also on the Sunday, but there are some things that I like to do as a routine. A cold bath is always something that is really good for mostly physical, for the physical recovery. However, I feel like mentally it also gives benefits, so this is something that I like to do most of the time. Massage, and the food for me is what fuels us, and obviously after such a big effort, which is a race, it's important to fuel the body in the best way. However, when we win like in Monaco, then you have to celebrate it and just enjoy the moment. But most of the time I'll say it's all about the recovery and thinking about the next one and get better as a team.
It must be so hard to constantly be thinking about the next one that's just around the corner.
Yes, but it's a sport that I think I've always said it's probably the case in Formula One, and it's a lot the case in Formula One. I think it's the case in most of the sport. You are as good as your last performance, and it's the last race for us. And I get here, and I'm sure that tomorrow when I'll do media day, everybody will be like, "Oh, amazing, Charles! You are doing such an incredible job this season."
Up for the next one, yeah.
And then if I do a bad job this weekend in Canada, then next race I'll have only negative questions saying, "Oh, you don't seem to be in a good form whatsoever." So you've got to be very flat and know where you are. And I think this is a strength I have, is not getting too carried away in the good moments, not getting carried away either too much in the moments that are more difficult, and just to be super honest with yourself and put the emotions aside when you need to assess your real performance, in order to always work in the same way and not be affected by outside elements too much.
I wanted to dive into the racing side, but you said something that was really interesting. Beyond obviously being a phenomenal driver, what's the other skill set that you think every Formula One driver needs to have?
For me, in Formula One, just like in many of the sports, if not all, where the athletes makes the biggest difference is the mental side, because we all drive since we are 4, 5, 6 years old. We all know how a perfect lap looks. It's just up to us to get as close to perfection as possible, and that means
that's a mental game?
Yes, as little mistakes as possible, and to always be on the limit and at your 100%. And at the end, this is where the mental is making the difference. And the mental is the most important thing for an athlete.
I think you need to know. Oh, it's a good question. I think you need to know handle well relationships in terms of in the team, and how to exploit the maximum of everyone that works with you. Navigate that. In order to perform at 100%, I think you need to make sure your engineers perform at 100%, your mechanics perform at 100%, and you need to be the driving force also of getting everyone around you to feel involved and to feel part of that. And I think that's an underestimated part of Formula One, what the difference that the driver can make on that sense. And I think just even this that we're doing now, handling the media, the sponsors, I think that's another skill set that if you don't have it, it doesn't mean you're not going to be an F1 driver, but it's better if you have it, because teams are going to appreciate the fact that you're good at that and not only good at driving.
From a data aggregation racing side perspective, like obviously Formula One today is much more technical than it is mechanical. It used to be much more mechanical, now it's a lot more technical. I know you haven't been in this space, you've been here a long time, but you haven't been in this space for decades yet. But do you remember a point in your career where you had this moment of, oh, the racing strategy is really driven by data? And did you feel that switch when you went from F2 to F1, where you're just like, wow, data's playing a huge role here?
I think there's been 2 steps in my career.
Okay.
First, from karting to single-seater.
Yeah.
When karting, at my time, there was no data. It was based purely on the feeling.
Okay.
You had very little data. You had I remember the exhaust temperature, the engine temperature, just to understand more or less where you were, and the lap time. And that's it. You had these 3 data.
3 data points.
You go to car racing.
Yeah.
And everything that you do is recorded. So you know exactly where you brake, where you go on throttle, where you downshift, where you upshift, where you turn, how much you turn, the suspension travel, the height of the car, how high is the car, at which point of the corner. All of these kind of things, which are already quite a lot of data straight away that you need to understand as a driver, and that you need to understand especially how to use them in your own benefit.
Yeah.
And then you get to Formula One, which is a whole new level, where every parts have got
data,
sensors, data. You can see absolutely everything to the finest details. And there, I think, as a driver, it's super important to know how to use specific data in your own benefit again. Yeah. Because there's so much available that it will be always impossible for me as a driver to look at all of those. And that's why we are a huge team, because we have so many people that are so specific on very little parts of the car, and that will use these sensors in the best possible way. However, as a driver, you just need to select what are the data that are most relevant to you in order to be the best on track. But it's so interesting, and that's why I love my job so much, is that I really consider that every laps I do, every session I do, as soon as I sit back down on my computer, I've got something to learn. There's something new that I can learn, and I can exploit myself forward and improve. And this what makes this job, again, if I can call that a job, because it's not a job for me. I think you can. So interesting.
Yeah, you've set me up perfectly for so many follow-up questions. You mentioned all of the different parts of the teams that have all of the different data sets. For you as a driver, what's the most important, or the top 3 pieces of data that you absolutely need, that you focus on if you have to handpick?
3?
Or if there's just one that comes to mind?
I don't know. A lot more.
You're just like, please, not enough.
I will look more than 3 data channels for sure. But if I really have to take 3, only 3, I will go for steering wheel, brake, and throttle. Steering wheel, brake, and throttle. Okay. Because that's what I do as a driver, what I can influence the most, and so these are the 3 data I look at all the time. But they are probably, I will say.
You're going to give me the whole list now.
I won't. There are too many secrets in that.
Yes, true. We'll bleep people that out. Yeah.
But I will say there's around 30, 35 data that I look at very specifically, and that I take whenever I need something a bit more specific as a driver that matters to me. But it changes. It depends. On some tracks it's going to be more, on some other tracks it's going to be less, and I just. The nice thing as well with data is that we are a sport where data cannot tell you absolutely everything, because you've got a human being as well in the car. And so you've got to learn, and this is a big work that we are doing with Ferrari, is how much sometimes, let's speak about the ride. The car is very, very stiff, and when you're on the curbs, the driver can handle a certain amount of how stiff the car is on curb. And then you need to look at the data and understand at which point, for you personally, what's your limit, and
that will be different from one driver to another.
From one driver to the other. And that's where data is super important, because then I've been in Ferrari since 2019, so now you can look at the data in a different way and interpret it very personally for each driver. So
you've got all the history also of that data.
And this is very interesting.
Is there a thing as too much data?
I don't think it's ever too much. I think, again, that's where as a driver you just need to accept that you won't be able to look at absolutely everything, because it's impossible. There are too many things around a Formula 1 car. There's everything is looked at in the smallest detail, and as a driver you cannot control everything. And you've got to accept that. But
God, that's a hard one to accept. Just be like, on that note, like one of the things that I specifically love, and you talk about this a lot about Formula 1, is how much of a team effort it is. Is there a balance at which point you have data and information that you're just like, this is for me, not for me and my teammate, or not for the team? Or is just that not a thing? All the data that you get is you share it across the garage?
No, we share everything. We share absolutely everything in the garage. I can have access to Carlos's data. Whenever I want, and exactly the same.
And it's beneficial.
Him. It's beneficial for everybody, because at the end we are a team and we need to help each other in order to win races. I will say that sometimes I can see something as a driver, or Carlos can see something as a driver in the data, and he realizes that I do something right, and maybe he takes inspiration from it, and he maybe is not going to say it out loud, because as a driver you just want to have the edge. But this is normal. This is like this in every team.
In every sport,
Exactly. But most of the data, I mean, all of the data are completely available to everybody. Then it's all about how you interpret them and what do you take out of them. But
I love it.
We work really well with Carlos together in order to
That's always a
bring
plus,
the team back to the top.
This might be a very it's a very detailed question, but I often see whether it's another driver who's looking at notes on his phone. George Russell always has this little black book that he reads before he gets in the car. How, when you go into your post-race debrief and you're gutting all of this insight and all of this information, do you write it down? Do you take voice notes? Do you go back and look at these notes? Like how, because you're being given so much information. Where does this?
I take a notebook with me whenever I have like tire testing.
Okay.
Because normally we go in the car at 9 and we get out at 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And there you do like 20 sessions or 15 sessions trying different things, and then you get out and in the debrief you need to speak about all these 15 sessions, and that's very, very difficult to
You have to upload everything that you've experienced.
So I'm basically writing everything. Then I use the notebook during the race weekend in order to like I was saying earlier, to try and select what are the main informations that are important to me. Yeah. So when I finish the debrief, actually, I'm going to write the 5 most important points of that debrief and what is going to help me to go faster on track. Because there are lots of informations, and some of them sometimes are just not that important to you as a driver. And so... and
then you just read them over the notes over the weekend and just...
read them quickly before getting into the car again.
So interesting. Yeah.
Just to make sure that I've got them very clear before getting into the car. But
it's like prepping for an exam every time. Just like, have you got all your information? You're good to go.
Exactly. But for the debrief of if I finish qualifying and I do a debrief, I don't write anything there just because it's still very fresh in mind. Gotcha. I remember exactly what were the feeling like, and I always like to do my comments before looking at the data.
Why?
Because at least you sometimes the feeling of the driver is super important. Yeah. As I was saying earlier, sometimes you've got a gut feeling and a preference as a driver, and then I like to confirm that feeling with data. But what
happens if you get the opposite, if it's not confirmed?
Well, this is a very good question, and this is something sometimes you either have to go with your guts and say, okay, maybe as a driver I know that I'm not optimizing the car, because the data is always right. Yeah. When it tells you something, it's the way it is. So it's exactly that way. But then you've got to judge as a driver whether you want to go with just being a bit more at ease and a bit more confident with the car, just because you feel the car better in that way, even if you know that it's not optimized perfectly, or whether you want to go for the perfectly optimized car and deal with not being as confident just because your driving style is different.
You're going against your gut.
Exactly.
One last question for you. What's the hardest thing about being a Formula One driver, and what's the easiest thing?
The hardest thing about being a Formula One driver, I would say, is all the activities around the sport.
Everything that distracts from the actual driving. Well, distracts is maybe a strong word, but
it takes quite a lot of energy at the end of the day. But again, as I've always said, we are so lucky to be in that position. Yeah. There are so many positives that comes with being a Formula driver that we really cannot complain.
Yeah. It doesn't make it easy, but you go with it. Yeah.
But
the easiest?
The easiest is just to enjoy every moment, because whenever you are at the track and you know that you are going to drive in a Formula One car with Ferrari, you can always enjoy it. So this is the best part of being a Formula One driver, for sure.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Charles.
No problem. Thank
you. Hi, welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi again. Actually, you're both talking about the rain, so let's kick off with a pretty easy question. People in F1 say that the rain is the great equaliser amongst the drivers. Do you agree with that?
Not anymore.
No.
Okay.
No.
Why?
There used to be a time where it equalized things. Now, I think all drivers, we are all very good in the rain.
Yeah.
And the rain means you spend more time in the corners because everything is slower.
Yeah.
So the amount of downforce that your car generates is actually more powerful in the rain than what it does in the dry. So the higher downforce cars are actually even better in the wet than in normal conditions.
I love that you both said,
I think it used to be the case like, 15, 20 years ago, something like this.
Okay.
But now, since then, we are all fully prepared for wet running. We are all at a really good level. So it depends on other factors, as Carlos said. Yeah. There's obviously the car in itself, there's the tire pressure can make a huge difference, and many other aspects that is a bit more difficult to predict with the rain as well.
Interesting. At what point did you both realize you had what it takes to be in Formula One? Was there a moment that it clicked for you?
I never thought about it until I actually signed my contract. I mean, you always wonder how will you do in Formula One, but it's not like, I mean, at least for me, it's not like I was like, okay, once I get to Formula One, I'll just destroy everybody and win everything.
They are not ready for me.
Yeah, you are just super excited to hopefully one day have the chance to actually show what you can do in Formula One, but you don't know whether you have the chance, whether you'll have the chance one day. So until Formula 2, for me, it was more a dream than a possibility. Then once I got to Formula 2, I was winning the championship, and there obviously I understood that it will be very likely I will end up in Formula 1. But before that, you don't really think about it. You just think about how can you get better in terms of driving, what can you do to improve short term in order to go step by step and make everything in order to get there one day.
So for you, that moment was basically signing your Formula 1 contract.
Exactly. Yeah.
For you, Carlos, was it similar?
Yeah, I was thinking, I think I was a bit more naive. I think I knew how difficult it was to get to Formula 1, and my dad kept reminding me the chances of you getting to Formula 1 are remote, tiny. But I remember for me there was a moment in the jump between karting and single-seaters that being fast in karting doesn't mean being fast in single-seaters. But then I jumped on a single-seater and I was very quick straight away. And everyone kept telling me that I was very quick. And at that point I said, well, I seem to be very quick, so maybe I have the talent to be in Formula 1. And there I started to believe Red Bull signed me as the junior driver, and then I started to believe it could be a possibility. And then I did a Formula 1 test 2-3 years before actually getting to Formula 1. They gave me the possibility to drive a Red Bull for a day, and I knew that test I was very quick, and I said, I have what it takes to be fast. Do I have what it takes to win, to make it to a top team, I don't know, but I knew I had the speed in a way, and I just wanted then to get to Formula 1 to show it, you know.
I bet.
And since then I was like more anxious about when am I gonna get there,
You once actually said that looking at cars on the TV, you just don't understand the complexity of the Formula 1 car when we watch it as fans at home, but even at the track, it's just impossible for us to understand the complexity. Can you help explain to the 99.999% of us who will never drive a Formula 1 car, even come close to it, what that complexity is like? How do you explain it to someone?
That's a very difficult question. Every time we try to put it into words, but I think until you actually experience it, to me, it always felt like a roller coaster that you can actually control.
That you can't, or you can?
That you can. I mean, it's a good sign. It's not a good sign if you cannot control. But no, it's like a roller coaster that you control perfectly, that you know extremely well. Because at the end of the day, to put a bit into context, sometimes we can feel a difference of 2 millimeters of rear ride height, and then you change a little bit the stiffness and all of this, and this we can feel in the car. So we, as I said, I think all drivers, we started when we were 3, 4, 5 years old, and we can probably feel things that for someone that doesn't have that experience cannot actually feel.
You know when something feels right or feels wrong because you've been used to it?
We feel extremely small things that I think is thanks to a set of database that we have inside our brain of all the experiences in every car, every lap that we've done in our career, which are probably millions of laps. And the body kind of remembers that, and thanks to that memory, muscle memory, we know and predict what the car is going to do in a way, and that's what allows us to take a Formula 1 car to the limit. And it's extremely difficult to describe it.
But that's true. I think Formula 1 now, everything is so fast that it's not really about reacting to what happened, but everything is about anticipating what's going to happen. Just because when you are going into a corner, you cannot react on what's going to happen. You've got to know exactly what you are going to do before going into that corner, and that is a very important part. I remember the first time I got into a Formula 1 car, and again, I drive since I'm 3.5 years old. I started when I was 3.5 years old, and I got into Formula 1, and you drive for the first 10 or 15 laps, and you're like, it's crazy how quick this feels, and you just feel like you are late in everything you do. Like the brain is
like a delay.
Is like 2-3 seconds behind, no? And then you drive, and then very, very quickly, because we can adapt quite quickly because, again, of our experience, you start to anticipate things, and that's where everything changes. And straight away you gain, I don't know, a second and a half.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the first 10 laps, you need to understand
Which
the
for
car
us
and
is a
everything.
lot. A second
It's
and a half.
crazy.
Yeah.
What did you say? Trust?
It's a lot. No, for us, a second and a half is a lot.
Of course, yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's all about anticipation and knowing exactly that if we do exactly that, that's going to happen with the car. Because at the end, you don't rely only on yourself. You rely also on a car, on mechanical parts that you've changed beforehand going out on track. And you need to anticipate all those things. And that's what makes this sport, I think, so interesting as well.
I previously was speaking with Charles about, obviously we're here with AWS and talking all things data and generative AI. Like, how have you felt this change as well in this sport? Do you remember a moment where you're just like, wow, this is a lot more data driven than it used to be? Do you remember a point in your career when you saw that shift or had that moment?
I think it's been data. It's been in Formula One for a long time, but I think now more recently, the more I speak with Formula One teams, the more they're trying to include AI into the future project of Formula One. No? And I think a lot of the future is going to be based around who exploits and who maximizes that tool the best, and where to apply that tool, how to apply it, and how they can help engineers and everyone in the design offices to get help from that tool for the future. No? And I think Formula One teams now are recognizing and adapting the teams to that direction.
Do you think if I ask people in 5 years, beyond being very fast, what's the second skill set that someone needs to have, that having a data-driven mind or a data-oriented perspective would be that second skill set as we get more and more data in this sport?
I think as drivers, we've learned how to use data.
You think,
I think drivers, the more you understand data and the more
it's your friend. You make it your friend.
I think we become quicker. I think there's so many tools that we can look at from each other on our driving, but also what the tire is doing, what the aerodynamic of the car is doing. That if we actually learn, not like an engineer, but like in a way of, that I can learn what is the car actually doing if I do this or if I do that with my driving, I become faster.
You can translate it into your
I can become
That's
faster.
what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
No, it's super important to be correlating what you feel in the car with the data. And when this becomes one, that's where you perform at your 100%. And it's a very difficult exercise, because sometimes when you put a new part on the track, you also when you put a new part on the car, you've got new sensors and you've got a new data there that you have to use and start to train yourself in order to say, okay, I see that on data, and this is what I feel,
incorporate it.
and this is how I feel in the car when I see that on data. And then you know exactly that when you see that, that is a good sign, because you feel good in the car when you see that. And that's where you become a better driver. And that's how I think we'll be able to use more data there in the best possible way for us in order to be quicker.
Maybe slightly different question, but I can't think of many drivers who wouldn't have driving for Scuderia Ferrari on their bucket list. I wanted to ask both of you, what else is on your bucket list? Obviously, Charles, I imagine that winning a Monaco race was on that bucket list as well, which you can tick that off. What else is on that wish list, bucket list?
Being a world champion.
Yeah.
I have to say that
Does not surprise me.
I had maybe, I think I had 5 things to achieve in my life, which was 1, to get to Formula One, which is done. I wanted to drive for Ferrari, which is done. I wanted to win in Monza being a Ferrari driver, which, I mean, or winning an Italian Grand Prix in general being a Ferrari driver, I think is extra special for us. And this year, not in 2019, happened. Monaco, I think the home race for every driver is on the bucket list. And then obviously the most important one is the title that I didn't quite make it yet. But that I will say is last one, speaking about Formula One,
Yeah.
is the last one that is on my bucket list that we'll do absolutely everything to achieve.
What about you, Thomas?
I think the first two are exactly the same.
Yeah,
Getting
for
to
every
Formula
driver,
One,
yeah.
driving for Ferrari, winning a race for Ferrari.
Yeah.
If that winning the race for Ferrari or for any other team is your home Grand Prix,
Yeah. That's
but
actually-
for Ferrari you want to win in Italy.
Yeah.
I think any Formula One driver wants to win in Monaco, which he's done two in one thing, Monaco and home, and becoming world champion. So I think those are very important bucket list points for a driver.
I've got some quick fire rapid questions for you both. Any idea how we say cloud computing in French, Italian or Spanish?
Cloud
'Cause I feel like we say
computing.
cloud computing in every language, but
Cloud computing.
I know cloud is nube.
Nuage in French, but I don't think it's.
informatique de nuage, apparently.
Informatique
Nube
de nuage.
informática.
Which is very sweet. It
Yeah.
feels very poetic.
Yeah, it's really poetic,
And
but I.
Terrible at
Nube
Spanish.
informática,
but
que en italiano
computación
sarebbe
in Italian.
Nuvola informatica. Maybe I've never heard of that. I think everybody
I
probably
think
says
everyone
it in
says
English.
it,
Yeah.
But I was curious, and apparently in Spanish it's
It's one of those
computación-
tech words that are
computación en la nube.
computación en la nube, sí, o nube informática también vale.
Okay. Okay. What's the best advice you've ever got about racing in Formula One?
In Formula One, I don't know.
Specifically, or
I always
or
talk.
life advice.
I always talk about the advice my dad gave me when I was in go-karting. That I always tended to be a bit naive, a bit innocent, naive, thinking everyone was my friend, thinking everyone was really nice to me, and playing football in the resting time, and then suddenly everyone was
Business.
yeah. How do you say when they
Bumping.
bumping me off the track?
Butting head. Ah, okay,
No,
yeah,
just in
okay,
the
on
track,
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
was like,
The friendship's gone.
yeah, friendship's gone, and I was maybe a bit
Okay.
softer in that sense. And my dad told me, you either bite or you get beaten. So go next time, make sure
Go
you're the
bite.
one. But yeah, and I started being, if anything, too much on the other hand. And since then, no one was bumping me on the track.
You know, Stamford, for you, what is it?
I'll say two.
Okay.
There are two that are very important. One is a very simple one, but just to be grateful. Just to be grateful and to remember that.
Like
Because
gratitude,
exactly, when you get to Formula One again, you get to a world that I think, or not that I think, that is not the real world. I mean, we live in a world that is completely crazy. When you do two steps back and you look at what we do, these are not normal things. We travel all over the world to drive Formula One cars, which is absolutely incredible, with so many fans around the world that are supporting us everywhere. And just to take a step back sometimes and realize how lucky we are to be in that position.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy, and I think it's very difficult to understand when you are not a Formula One driver in our position, to feel like everything is so bad when you have two races that are not going well in a row. And the performance is not what you want, and you are doing your best, but it's, for some reason, sometimes it just doesn't click.
Or you're unlucky. Or
Yeah. And in those situations, it's so easy as an athlete to put yourself so down and to feel like everything is so bad, and to lose a little bit that grateful feeling, and to remember yourself how lucky you are. And second, I think very often you are told, don't do this mistake, don't do this one. And the best advice that I got is actually when I got first into Formula One, is use this opportunity. Now you're new to Formula One, make all the mistakes, go for it and make those mistakes, and you'll learn from them. And I think this is a very important one, because when you get to Formula One, you are in a place where everybody looks at you.
Yeah.
You have a lot of pressure, and the normal thing to think of once you get into that position is like, don't mess up. And that's where I think you start to just not show your full potential, and that's where you risk of being out. And I remember after 3-4 races when I got into Formula One, I was honestly really struggling. I was not doing mistakes, but I was so slow. And then I was just like, okay, I cannot continue like this. It's not working at all. So I'm just going to go for it. And that's where actually I learned from it, and I could actually show my potential. So these two ones were the most important ones.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sitting down with both Carlos and Charles to learn a little bit more about what it takes to be a Formula One driver and what their day-to-day looks like. And please do subscribe to the channel. This is greatly appreciated, and you'll be notified when the next video comes.